Welcome back to the Nursing Post podcast, All Nursing All the Time with Ashley and Rosa. Today's episode is going to talk about emotional intelligence. As always, our goal is to inform and to spark conversation.
So everyone has heard about IQ, which is intelligence quotient. So basically, you take tests in different areas and it spits a number out at you. And that tells you pretty much how quick you can learn something and how well you learn it. But it hasn't been until recently that there's another type of quotient that's out there and has become like a really big topic of conversation. They call it EQ, which means emotional intelligence. And it's actually about a person's ability to identify and control their own emotions and the emotions of others, like how they're able to deal with that as well.
According to the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report, emotional intelligence will be one of the top 10 job skills in 2020. That says a lot because this emotional intelligence is what's really going to be, I think, one of the leading things that employers are going to look for.
Well, I used to work on the human resource side. Mm-hmm. And back in the day, I hate when I say that because I'm not old, you know what I mean? But it makes me sound old. But when I worked human resources, literally everything was about dollars and cents. It hasn't been until here recently that it's more about the experience, right? Your client experience, your patient experience. Because word of mouth is the best referral source that you'll ever have. So yeah, IQ used to be the thing back in the day, but this EQ is taking over.
And according to one study called The Emotional Intelligence of HR, only 30% of companies look for emotional intelligence during a hiring process. 37% of surveyed organizations use emotional intelligence assessments to help inform their leadership of development programs. I think that this is formal use of emotional intelligence. I think that good managers and good people that are hiring absolutely are using emotional intelligence and they don't know.
I don't think a lot of people are really aware of it. So let's say you go online and you fill out an application, and then at the end of that application, you have to take a test.
Yes.
Even I didn't realize until I was doing the research and reading all of these articles that some of those questions in there are to scale your emotional intelligence to see if you'll be the right fit in a hospitality service or customer service. Like they're looking for that emotional intelligence in those types of jobs and settings.
Well, yeah, because it's going to save money. A large metropolitan hospital reduced their critical care nursing turnover from 65% to 15% in just a year and a half by implementing that screening tool, which is pretty significant, especially in nursing.
Well, let's think about it. I mean, we're both nurses. Mm-hmm. If you're not a people person or have a really good bedside manner, a lot of times nursing might not be the right fit for you. Like, I don't know who, if you're in it for the money, it's going to show.
Oh, absolutely. Sanofi, the French pharmaceutical company, focused on emotional intelligence skills of their sales force, which boosted their annual performance by 12%.
Every little cent helps. That's all I'm saying.
Research conducted with Fortune 500 CEOs by Stanford Research Institute International and Carnegie Mellon Foundation found that 75% of long-term job success depends on people skills, while the other 25% is technical knowledge. And I have said all along that in nursing, 80% of it is being a nice person, while the other 20% is what you know. So I guess my numbers were a little off, but not too far.
In nursing, you do need, I'm not trying to be funny or play devil's advocate. However, I would want a nurse to know what the hell she's doing.
Mm-hmm. But would you be okay with a nice nurse who goes, I don't know that, let me get back with you? Or a nurse that has terrible bedside manner but is super smart?
Oh, damn, that's hard.
So
That's
like if
hard.
you're not approachable because you have terrible bedside manner, it doesn't matter how smart you are. Nobody's going to see through that. They're just going to see that you're mean and rude.
That's true.
If you're nice, people are going to give you more grace. So you may not know the answers. You may need, more assistance. But if you have a nice nurse that tries to stick you twice and they're like, I'm so sorry, I got to get somebody else. And they get somebody else and she comes in and she's a complete bitch, but she gets you on the first try. It's like, okay, well, maybe if you're petrified of needles, but I'd almost rather have a nice person trying than somebody to come in and is being rude to me because I'm there getting help.
Well, that's true. And I think you do build a better rapport when you're more approachable.
Yes. And with that, usually in turn leads to better medical care.
Absolutely. I don't care. Like you said, if you're sticking me twice, that's fine. You're not a bitch while you're doing it.
Right. But how much grace are you going to have for that nice person who had to stick you twice? If that person came in and they were being a raging whatever
Karen
that day, and that's perfect. Karen, love it. And they miss on the off shot, you're going to be a lot less willing to let them stick you again versus
you're absolutely right. Interestingly enough, people with a high EQ make $29,000 more a year than people with a low EQ. I think that's, what we're pretty much talking about here is being approachable. There's a particular fast food restaurant that people, I don't think, go there because they love the food so much. I think they go for the pleasurable experience. Honestly,
and I know exactly what you're talking about.
I know you do. They're very efficient. They double verify. And then, at the end of your experience and you say, thank you. They're like, oh, my pleasure. I'm like, heck, why don't people come back? And they're closed on Sundays and they still make a profit because of the experience. Oh, yeah. That right there in itself says everything.
Well, I mean, I've been eating at that same place for
ever.
Gosh, I'm 35, so as long as I can remember. I'm going to tell you, I've had them mess up my order once.
I mean, hands down, they have their shit together. There's no doubt about it.
And I can't say that about any other fast food restaurant.
Yeah, I can't say that about everybody else, but they have a process and they double verify, actually triple. They check twice when you're ordering. And then when you're picking it up at the window, they're asking you, this is what your order was. So, I mean, they have a process and a system that works. And on top of that, they do have that training on how to be approachable and a people person. And I mean, that's why they have such a successful business today.
Yep.
A single point increase in your EQ adds to $1,300 to your salary. $1,300 is a lot. Just by learning to have people skills. Social and emotional abilities were 4 times more important than IQ in determining somebody's personal success and prestige. It's one of those things, like you were saying before, you may know how to do something, but it's in the approach of how you do it. That means everything.
It really does.
Emotional intelligence accounts for nearly 90% of what moves people up the corporate ladder when IQ and technical skills are roughly similar. And that is actually from a Harvard Business Review that was published. These are very known facts and statistics, like they hold water.
I don't think anybody would be surprised by hearing that people that are more approachable and more of a people person can move up the ladder quickly. They make more money. But when it comes to emotional intelligence, there are specific traits that people have and the way their thought process is that make them different. It's not just, oh, they're a people person.
No, there are a lot of little different aspects and, like you said, little traits. And, some people might be better at one trait than they are in another. It's okay. There are things that, like, I know I can be more tactful than some people, but that is something that I had to work on over the years. That's not, I think, something that everybody has.
Nope.
It's not like if you don't have one of these traits that you can't work toward it.
That is one of the nice things about what we're talking about is all of these things can be learned.
It's a form of self-improvement and actually self-love because it doesn't only affect your professional life. These traits can help mold your personal life as well.
Absolutely. One of the traits is self-awareness. To me, this is self-explanatory of what self-awareness is, but it's pretty much being able to recognize your own strengths and weaknesses. When you hear strengths and weaknesses, the first thing that comes to mind for me is an interview. What's your strengths and what's your weaknesses? Being able to actually say, these are things that I need to work on, these are things I don't need to work on, mean a lot. It means that you know, and if you know things that you can improve upon, you can actually improve upon them. But if you are naive enough to think that there's nothing that you can improve upon, you're wrong.
That's called denial.
Yes. When you know what you can improve upon or what you're really good at, then all of a sudden your values, your sense of purpose can align with that and make for kind of a better self altogether. Not just at work, but throughout life.
In life, in general, period. In any encounter or relationship you have. Another trait is emotional self-control. I think a lot of people are lacking this in this day and age. Back in the day, I would say a lot of people had this under wraps.
I would agree.
But as we've moved through the decades, a lot of people just have no filter. There's no other way that I can really explain it. You have to have the ability to keep your emotions in check. And definitely when you're in a stressful situation, you honestly cannot go ham on people because they said something that you didn't like, or you can't take constructive criticism. You have to have the ability to self-control. You in this life cannot control anybody else other than yourself. So you have the ability to tame and control your actions and reactions.
And I think society now is very much an instant gratification, which I think has contributed to the diminishing lack of self-control.
I'm in agreement with that. I also feel we have some generations that are entitled or have that feeling of entitlement. You know, we are living in an era where everybody gets a trophy, whether you win or lose. And I know that wasn't the case back in the day.
I think that there's been enough research done to know that that's not a good thing.
No, it's not.
And this leads us straight into our next trait, which is adaptability.
What a coinky-dink. So everybody knows about adaptability, and it is one of the hardest things. Like, nobody really likes change. That's what adaptability means, is how flexible are you to change? Yes. You know, how easy are you to kind of like go with the flow, or are you more hesitant? Do you push back?
Right.
I think all of us have at some time pushed back on the system when we felt like maybe it wasn't aligned with our beliefs or professional code of ethics.
Right.
Which is okay. I'm not trying to tell people that it's not okay to do that. But we need to realize that the only thing constant in life is change, and it is ever changing. So we have to be able to learn how to adapt to that.
It really is something that's very much pertinent to nursing right now. It's funny because I am very much a person of change. I like doing things different. Let's see what happens if we do it this way. The worst thing that's going to happen is it doesn't work and we go back to doing it the old way. I think this is probably one of my bigger strengths is I'm like, all right, let's change the way we do it. That's my first thought. This ain't working. Let's change the way we do it.
I'm totally in agreement with that. And I worked for an employer in the past that was like, I will listen to any concern or complaint that you have, but if you bring it to me, you better come with some solutions as well.
Well, yeah, because otherwise you're just complaining. You're not
Exactly.
You're not actually trying to help. And
you're
I'm
not solving the situation.
exactly.
I actually use that and hold on to that a lot. So anytime I would go to an employer or somebody with a concern, I'd say, this might not be working this way. Have we thought about doing it this way? You know, a lot of times people are hesitant and they don't want to change. You and I both know that from the place where we worked before. They were very hesitant, very closed-minded in that regard. Yes. They were very old school. Achievement orientation is another trait. You appreciate constructive criticism instead of being offended by it, and are constantly looking for ways to make things better. Like you and I were talking about, we would go to person A and say, hey, this isn't working. Have we thought about doing this way? And then they would be like, we've tried that in the past. It didn't work. But the past was actually like 20, 30 years ago, and things aren't what they were 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, and in medicine, that's a long time. You know, it's
thank you. And you're like, okay, things aren't the same as they are now, 20, 30 years ago. No, everything is completely changed.
The mindset,
and they're still like
technology. Everything.
It was rough. It was rough. And I know you know.
I do.
But you have to be able to take that constructive criticism and look for things to make life better. I'm all for the work smarter, not harder. I will say that every day, all day long. Because it's not my goal for you to come into the place of work, kill yourself.
No.
Literally. Then go home and have to come back and do it again. That's honestly like having a rock or a wheel and not know how to roll the damn thing. Yeah. I mean, it's just crazy to me. Having a positive outlook is another trait. And when you think about this in general, it's positivity. You're trying, it's almost like law of attraction. What you put out is what you get back.
And this is your mindset.
Yeah. So if you're constantly thinking, I can, I will, then you do. And so when you're seeking the good in people, the good in situations, and the good events, then your mindset is like, oh, my cup is always half full. So you're not a Debbie Downer. You're not a pessimist. You're just trying to find the bright side of things. And there's nothing wrong with that.
And this is not saying that you completely ignore other factors, but typically in most situations, there is a positive outcome. You may not be able to see it at first, but your approach to the situation should come in a positive way instead of a negative one. Another trait, and this is really big within the nursing field, is empathy. And this is just being able to put yourself in another person's shoes. And as a nurse, if you don't know what empathy is, then that is a little frightening to me. But you have to say, if I was that person or going through this situation, would I see things differently? Would I change your perspective? And being in a leadership position, which a lot of people that have a higher EQ are in leadership positions, as our statistic has shown, they are 90% more likely to get a job of leadership if they're going up against somebody else who doesn't have as high as EQ. This is why. Because you can effectively make good changes and develop those relationships because you're able to empathize with your coworkers, your employees, just people in general.
Absolutely. So one of the things I learned in nursing school, the difference between sympathy and empathy. And let me tell you, there's a very big difference.
Yes.
Sympathy is saying, let me just say an example. Ashley, you told me like your dog died or something. And I say, oh, I'm so sorry. That's sympathy. Like, I'm giving you condolences, but is it really heartfelt? Right. Am I really putting myself in your shoes and attempting to kind of feel the feelings that you're feeling? Right. That's empathy. When somebody is literally putting themselves in your shoes and attempting to feel what you're feeling, which is extremely important to have in nursing. Extremely important.
You need both, because there are going to be times where it is hard to empathize with patients because you have no way of even trying to wrap your mind around it. I have never lost a child, never have miscarried, never have lost a child. So it would be very hard for me to empathize with a person who has. Now, absolutely. I could think of how devastating it would be for me to lose a child, but I would be more prone to offer sympathy than empathy.
Empathy.
you have to be aware of, okay, if I were in their shoes, what would I want? What would be helpful for me if that was me? And that's how you try to empathize with other people in situations that you've never been in or can relate to in some way.
Completely agree.
Another trait is organizational awareness. And this means that you can pick up on the vibe of a room in a group of people.
I'm all about this.
I call this
into a room and I'm like, the energy's not right.
Yeah.
Which is also the vibe. I'm not feeling it.
I call it situational awareness. That's kind of how I look at this. Like you need to be able to read the room.
Absolutely.
The best way to do that is honestly to sit back and watch, which is completely up my alley.
I'm a people watcher too. So. Yeah, I'm a people watcher too. I get it. But that's how you develop that ability to read the energy, read the room, catch the vibe, because maybe the vibe is not there at all. And that's just not the place where you want to be right then and there. And I feel like a lot of that also is intuition and that gut feeling. So when your gut's gnawing you, you really need to listen and pay attention to that. Don't ignore that. That is super important. And that
is something you have to learn, because that was something that I had to learn. I learned that with the help of you, Rosa. It's true.
I'm older than you. I am older than you. Not by a whole lot, because I don't want people thinking I'm about to collect SSI. I'm far from it. But I know sometimes I sound like that because I keep saying back in the day. But our age isn't so different. But I do love that. I do love that we do have an age difference. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that takes away from either one of our maturity at all.
No.
We just know how to read each other.
Yes.
And that's exactly the point that we're trying to prove. Age shouldn't matter. Yeah. Gender shouldn't matter. Race shouldn't matter. You should be able to read the room and conduct yourself accordingly.
Yep, at any given time. It's that in itself to me would be a huge step forward for anybody looking to increase their emotional intelligence.
Absolutely. And I'm telling you, that trait in and of itself is valuable if you're trying to move up the corporate ladder.
Right. So influence is another trait of emotional intelligence. And this is just people that are natural leaders. There are people that just, when you're around them, you want to do better. They motivate you. Those are people that have influence. Not everybody is going to fit in that category, and that is okay. Having an overall good emotional intelligence doesn't mean that you're hitting every single one of these traits that we're talking about. It's more about you're hitting most of these traits and improving on, or trying to improve on all of them. So with the influence, you just want to make sure that if you're in a place of leadership, that you are approaching things with other people that are in a way that's motivating to them. So, and again, read your room. If you walk into a bunch of nurses and you want to motivate them, it's probably not a good idea to bring a couple pizzas.
Oh my God. And definitely leave the deck of cards at home. Nobody wants them.
I've done this before. I had a meeting on a weekend. I am not currently in a leadership role at where I work, but I knew that when I was going, it was a Saturday. Nobody wanted to be there. There's only a couple of us there, and I stopped at Starbucks and I knew some of their favorite drinks. And I just bought drinks for everybody. Mm-hmm. Took it to the office, and it was a complete mindset change when people just were like, one, I thought about them. Two, I think that they were surprised that I knew what they drank. And three, it was just funny because nurses and caffeine.
So I feel like one of the most important traits of EQ is coaching and mentoring. I feel like anyone in any job field that's in a leadership position has to be able to coach and mentor. It's just, and I'm telling you now, to this day, leaders are having issues with this.
Yes.
They honestly are having issues with this because they don't know how to do it. Mm-hmm. For instance, the assisted living that I was a director of nursing for, the ED was also a nurse. However, she could not do a COVID test.
Could not, would not.
I think would not.
Yeah.
Everybody knows the instructions are in the box. It's like any other medication. If you were pulling up an injectable or doing a BCG treatment, the instructions are always there. They have to be. It's a federal requirement. If you're not willing to get into the trenches with your team and
your team is going to see that real fast.
Exactly. So coaching and mentoring to me is one of the most important things. You know, in medicine, there's a saying that says, show one, do one, teach one. That's the whole purpose of medicine is not to just keep it to yourself, but to mentor and help grow other individuals. And that phrase was actually invented for surgeons to use while they're teaching their students how to do these surgical procedures. The point is to foster long-term learning and constructive feedback and support. And the only way you're going to do that is by being a mentor, especially to baby nurses, because you know as well as I do that seasoned nurses, they're like sharks and they will eat up those baby nurses like nobody's business. And we've talked about that.
Yeah, and that's one of the big things, you know, where I'm currently at. There are, you know, we have RNs and LPNs, and we're all trying, I think, very hard that when we are mentoring people, that we're doing it in a very thoughtful way. I don't think I would have thought about that much 5 years ago. I just think that it's a different mindset.
Well, when you think about it, they've made a lot of adjustments and have relaxed a lot of the requirements during the pandemic that were previously required before. So, you know, some people got to, and this is not only nurses, I'm talking about doctors, physicians, assistants, nurse practitioners. A lot of people got to skip a lot of stuff. Yeah, it makes me cringe, but I also understand the reasoning behind it at the time.
Right.
Those are the ones to me that are going to need this coaching and mentoring, because there has been no other time that I know of in history in which they throw people basically to the wolves to fend for themselves in a situation that has never, ever happened before.
Oh, yeah. And I think a lot of the seasoned nurses are seeing that these new nurses are being thrown to the wolves. And, you know, I was very much told, see one, do one, teach one. And you catch on quick, and that there's no other way around it. In a way, that's good for me, because that's actually how I learn. I just need to do it. You just stand over top of me, make sure I don't mess anything up, and let's go. That's just kind of how I've always been within nursing. And it's funny because when I first started the job that I'm at now, they said, hey, can you do IVs? I'm like, well, I can do IVs, but I haven't done IVs in years. And one of the nurses that was interviewing me, she's just like, but how do you feel about it? I'm like, what do you mean? How do I feel about it? I'm not sure what you're asking me. And she's like, well, would you be comfortable enough to try? I was like, you know, it's kind of see one, do one, teach one. I mean, has that changed in nursing? And she is an older nurse. And she started laughing and she said, oh, you'll fit in just fine, you know? And I think that part of that conversation is one of the reasons why I was hired, because they offered me that job the same day, was because it was like, oh, she understands that you just have to jump in. And some other nurses are very timid. They don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. And I understand that to a certain point. But in nursing, if you just don't start doing it, you're never going to be comfortable with it.
Well, and you're never going to get to the point in your career where you want to be if you're consistently timid and shy and you don't go for it.
Right.
You know that saying, go big or go home?
Exactly.
Like in nursing, that's kind of how you have to be. And nursing school in itself, I kind of feel like you don't get enough of the on-hands clinical experience. I probably bothered the crap out of my instructors, because every time they were like, we need a volunteer to do this, this, and that, I was forever like two hands in the air, because I knew that this is going to be probably my only time during the rotations and clinicals that I was going to have hands on. And I wanted to be the most prepared person that I could be to be a better nurse, so that, you know, I could transfer that on to, you know, my patients. I hate telling patients, oh, well, you'll be my guinea pig today. Another very important, I feel, very important emotional intelligence trait for me is conflict management. And I think I'm so grateful that I had that human resources experience to kind of help navigate, because I can tell you, even I know, as a nurse, trying to conflict resolute between two CNAs, that in itself is a lot to handle. And if you do not have the right approach or know how to come in at different angles and think outside the box on how to bring two people together to effectively communicate the issues in order to solve them, it's going to be very hard to have your team on your side, having each other's backs, and looking out for the collective.
And it's not just even like coworkers. I mean, you have patient to nurse, doctor to patient. Like, there's all these moving parts that have to fit together perfectly. And nurses are not just like caregivers in a sense of we provide care. Like, it's all this other stuff. I mean, you'll see post after post after post, like nurses are maids, they're the kitchen, they're, giving medicines, they're
room service.
Like, it's everything. And this is part of that. They're therapists. There you go. And teamwork is another thing that is very important with emotional intelligence. How you interact with groups, others, people that are beneath you, your peers, people that are above you. All of that takes into consideration how well you can, deal with people, handle people, different opinions, being able...
You're going to get a lot more respect. Yes. Like I said before, if you get your hands down and dirty and in the trenches, you're going to get a lot more respect. And we've talked about this on prior episodes. Your CNA is your lifeline. For God's sakes, do not turn your nose up on your CNA. No. Because when they're asking you for help, you better put smiling and happily be ready to do it. Because when you're hands deep in a patient and you need their help and you didn't go to help them, they're not going to help you. So, teamwork is of the utmost importance. And, this goes for the boss that sits in the office who refuses to do a COVID test, or refuses to pass meds, or refuses to assess a patient or a resident. You're not going to have any respect. No. Your team is not going to respect you, because I would never ask somebody to do something that I'm not willing to do myself.
Exactly. And
period.
And also when you're dealing with teamwork, you have to be able to interact with other people, hear their opinions, be open-minded, understand different perspectives.
That's just everything. I'm not trying to be funny, but the saying is teamwork makes the dream work, because it does.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter which role or position you play on the team. Every member of that team is just as important. From the concierge to the housekeeper, to the dietary department, to the nursing department. All of these people play a role on the team. And that one missing link, it'll hurt you.
It absolutely will. That, I think, leads us into our last trait, which is inspirational leadership. And this is just you being the person that has the courage to speak that vision and show everybody why it is important to do what it is that they do.
It's like a natural born ability to motivate people, to get them to rally on your side, to get them to not make it seem like you're demanding them to do it, but that they are willing participants in whatever process that you're trying to make them a part of. This is like vision, mission, everybody's on the same team. And really, you have to be a natural born motivational leader to do that.
I know a lot of what we've talked about today, it's really been work related, but emotional intelligence really does go beyond work into your home life.
Well, all those traits, yes, they are important professionally, but they're also, like you said, important personally. When you take into consideration self-awareness or conflict management, people have to go to therapies and in marriages and in relationships to have somebody help them with this.
Yes. Not only does it help with a lot of those like personal aspects, but when you're at work and you're emotionally intelligent and you're making those good decisions, so you know your technical part, your emotional part is in check, you're able to navigate a lot of these problems more effectively, then you're less stressed. And we all know if you get really stressed, you can have increased blood pressure, heart rates, hormone imbalances. There's a lot that stress does to your body. We did a podcast on that last year.
We did.
It's not just, your like friends and family, it's your own physical health and mental health. And
which is of the utmost importance.
And it's funny because people who have a higher EQ tend to do well professionally, and they tend to have careers that pretty much are like public service. They're social workers, teachers, nurses, those people that are always helping. That's where they land, and that makes complete sense to me.
I feel the same way. And once again, people, they tend to do well successfully because of that conflict resolution and that natural leadership. If you are interested in knowing your EQ, click on this link that we're going to post in our show notes so that you can see where you score and what areas you need to work on. Ashley and I have taken the test, and so we're going to post that up along with, our show notes so that you guys can take a look and see. It does give you a lot of good information and a lot of good feedback, and it's very important. It's important for personal and for professional success. So you can visit us at the nursingpostpodcast.com, and you can click on our link, and you can subscribe to our website there as well. And you can definitely catch us on your favorite platforms. Thanks again for joining us.